A Polaroid photo of an unidentified young woman and boy, gagged and seemingly bound, was discovered in a convenience store parking lot in Port St. Joe, Florida. The young woman is widely believed to be Tara Calico, who was kidnapped. The disappearance of Tara Calico is a haunting enigma that has persisted for over 3 decades, captivating the public and confounding investigators since that fateful day in September 1988. Tara Lee Calico, a bright and vivacious 19-year-old from Belen, New Mexico, set out on her regular bike ride along New Mexico State Road 47, a route she had taken numerous times before. It was a seemingly ordinary day, but it would mark the beginning of a mystery that continues to baffle law enforcement and haunt Tara's loved ones to this day. When Tara failed to return home by the afternoon, her mother, Patty Dole, grew increasingly concerned. Tara was known for her punctuality and responsible nature, making her sudden disappearance all the more alarming. Patty wasted no time in reporting her daughter missing to the authorities, sparking a massive search effort that would span weeks, months, and eventually, years. Despite extensive search efforts, including air and ground searches, door-to-door inquiries, and widespread media coverage, Tara's whereabouts remained elusive. The community rallied around the Calico family, organizing vigils, distributing flyers, and tirelessly searching for any sign of the missing teenager. However, as days turned into weeks and weeks into months, hope began to wane, replaced by the grim realization that Tara's disappearance might remain unsolved. One of the most chilling developments in Tara's case occurred nearly a year after her disappearance when a Polaroid photograph surfaced in a convenience store parking lot in Port St. Joe, Florida, approximately 1,600 miles away from Belen. The photo depicted a young woman and a boy, both bound and gagged, lying on a mattress in what appeared to be the back of a van. Many believed the young woman bore a striking resemblance to Tara, reigniting hope that she might still be alive and held captive. The discovery of the Polaroid sparked a renewed frenzy of media attention and public interest in Tara's case. The photograph was analyzed by experts, and numerous leads were pursued, but no conclusive evidence linking it to Tara or her disappearance was ever found. Despite the tantalizing lead, Tara remained missing, leaving her family and the community grappling with uncertainty and grief. Over the years, numerous theories and potential suspects have emerged, ranging from abduction to voluntary disappearance. Despite the passage of time, Tara's case has never been closed, and her family has never stopped searching for answers. They have continued to advocate tirelessly for Tara, keeping her memory alive and seeking justice on her behalf. On June 13, 2023, the Valencia County Sheriff's Office made a significant announcement regarding the 1988 disappearance of Tara Calico. Sheriff Denise Vigil, alongside other law enforcement officials, held a press conference to disclose a breakthrough in the case. Sheriff Vigil stated that based on the evidence gathered, law enforcement believed there were enough grounds to present the investigation to the district attorney's office for potential charges. However, she also mentioned that the identities and details of the persons of interest were sealed by the court and would remain confidential unless otherwise ordered by the court. Today, more than 3 decades later, Tara Calico's disappearance remains one of the most enduring mysteries in American history. Her story serves as a poignant reminder of the countless individuals who vanish without a trace, leaving behind unanswered questions and shattered lives. Until the truth about what happened to Tara is uncovered, her loved ones will continue to hold on to hope and pursue justice for their beloved daughter, sister, and friend. The photo of Mademoiselle Blanche Monnier, a French girl who was held captive for 24 years by her mother in a padlocked shuttered room at around 1901. Blanche Monnier's story is a haunting tale of captivity and abuse that shocked France in the late 19th century. Born into a respectable, bourgeois family in Poitiers in 1849, Blanche seemed destined for a life of privilege and comfort. However, her fate took a dark and tragic turn when she fell in love with an older lawyer, Émile Augerod, whom her mother vehemently opposed due to his lack of wealth and social standing. In a desperate bid to break off the relationship and preserve the family's reputation, Blanche's mother, Louise Monnier, resorted to extreme measures. In 1874, She locked Blanche away in a small, windowless room within their home, where she remained imprisoned for an astonishing 25 years. During this time, Blanche's existence was shrouded in secrecy, and her family went to great lengths to conceal her captivity from the outside world. Blanche's plight only came to light in 1901, when an anonymous letter tipped off the authorities about her whereabouts. Police raided the Monnier residence and made the shocking discovery of Blanche, emaciated and barely recognizable, confined to a squalid room with no access to sunlight or proper hygiene. The conditions of her captivity were appalling, and her physical and mental health had deteriorated significantly over the years. The case sparked outrage across France, with the public demanding justice for Blanche and her swift removal from the custody of her abusive family. Louise Monnier was arrested and charged with unlawful imprisonment, although she adamantly denied any wrongdoing and insisted that she had acted in her daughter's best interests. Blanche, too traumatized to speak, was initially placed in a psychiatric hospital for treatment and rehabilitation. The trial of Louise Monnier captivated the nation and shed light on the dark underbelly of familial abuse and control. Despite her claims of maternal concern, Louise was found guilty and sentenced to prison, where she died shortly thereafter. Blanche, now freed from her years of captivity, lived out the remainder of her life under the care of compassionate guardians, shielded from the prying eyes of the curious public. Blanche Monnier's ordeal sparked widespread reforms in France aimed at protecting vulnerable individuals from abuse and exploitation, ensuring that her legacy would endure as a beacon of hope for future generations. Photos of the Jonestown Massacre depict the largest mass suicide ever recorded. Over 900 people died from self-poisoning, although some were forced at gunpoint. A tub containing a drink laced with cyanide was used, with People's Temple followers either drinking it voluntarily or being forced to do so. The Jonestown Massacre is a harrowing and complex event that unfolded over several years, culminating in a tragic act of mass suicide that shocked the world in November 1978. At the center of this dark chapter in history was Jim Jones, a charismatic and enigmatic figure who founded the People's Temple, a religious organization that began in Indianapolis, Indiana, in the 1950s. Jones, an ordained minister with a penchant for social justice and progressive ideals, attracted a diverse following with his message of racial equality, socialism, and communal living. The People's Temple quickly grew in size and influence, drawing in members from all walks of life, including activists, intellectuals, and the marginalized. However, beneath the veneer of utopian ideals lay a darker reality. As the People's Temple expanded, so too did concerns about Jones's increasingly authoritarian leadership style and reports of abuse within the organization. Former members spoke of psychological manipulation, physical abuse, and forced labor, painting a troubling picture of life within the temple. In 1977, facing mounting legal troubles and growing scrutiny from the media and government agencies, Jones made the fateful decision to relocate the People's Temple to a remote jungle outpost in Guyana, South America. Named Jonestown after its founder, the settlement was intended to be a utopian community free from the perceived corruption and oppression of the outside world. Life in Jonestown was marked by strict discipline, indoctrination, and a pervasive atmosphere of fear and paranoia. Jones maintained total control over his followers, employing tactics of manipulation and coercion to ensure their unwavering loyalty. Dissent was met with punishment, dissenters were ostracized, and defectors were branded as traitors. As the isolation of Jonestown deepened, so too did Jones's descent into madness. He became increasingly paranoid, convinced that the temple was under threat from external forces determined to destroy them. The settlement was fortified with armed guards, and drills were conducted to prepare for a potential siege. On November 18, 1978, the world was stunned by news of a mass suicide at Jonestown. Acting on Jones's orders, over 900 men, women, and children drank cyanide-laced flavor aid in a coordinated act of self-destruction. The exact circumstances surrounding the massacre remain the subject of intense debate and speculation. Some believe that the mass suicide was a result of coercion and manipulation by Jones, who had instilled in his followers a deep-seated fear of persecution and a belief in the necessity of martyrdom. Others argue that the events at Jonestown were a tragic culmination of psychological manipulation, isolation, and groupthink, fueled by Jones's increasingly erratic behavior and paranoia. In the aftermath of the massacre, the world grappled with shock and disbelief, struggling to comprehend how such a tragedy could have occurred. The Jonestown Massacre remains one of the most chilling examples of the dangers of unchecked power, blind devotion, and the human capacity for both good and evil. The Class of '99 photo, taken shortly before the Columbine Massacre, shows Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold making gun signs. Unbeknownst to their classmates, they had been planning the shooting spree for over a year. The Columbine High School Massacre occurred on April 20th, 1999, in Columbine, Colorado, United States. Two students, Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold, carried out a meticulously planned attack on their high school, resulting in one of the deadliest school shootings in American history. Harris and Klebold, who were seniors at Columbine High School, arrived armed with firearms, improvised explosive devices, and propane bombs. They began their assault by detonating a propane bomb in the school cafeteria, intending to cause mass casualties. When the bomb failed to detonate as intended, Harris and Klebold entered the school armed with firearms and began indiscriminately shooting students and faculty. Over the course of approximately 49 minutes, the pair roamed the hallways and classrooms of Columbine High School, targeting anyone they encountered. They used firearms, including handguns and a sawed-off shotgun, to carry out their rampage. In addition to the shootings, they also planted numerous pipe bombs and IEDs throughout the school, adding to the chaos and confusion. The massacre resulted in the deaths of 12 students and 1 teacher, and it left 21 others injured. Harris and Klebold ultimately took their own lives in the school's library as law enforcement closed in on them. The attack sent shockwaves throughout the nation and prompted widespread debates about gun control, school safety, bullying, and the influence of violent media on youth. In the aftermath of the Columbine Massacre, significant changes were made to school security protocols and law enforcement response tactics. The tragedy also led to increased awareness of mental health issues among adolescents and renewed efforts to identify and address the warning signs of potential violence. The photos depicted the mummified bodies of the girls Anatoly Moskvin had exhumed and transformed into what he referred to as human dolls. Anatoly Moskvin, a Russian linguist, historian, and necrophile, was a highly educated and well-traveled individual. He spoke 13 languages, traveled extensively, taught at the college level, and worked as a journalist in Nizhny Novgorod, Russia's 5th largest city. Moskvin was also a self-proclaimed expert on cemeteries, dubbing himself a necropolist. His deep knowledge earned him respect in some circles, with one colleague even calling his work priceless. However, Moskvin took his expertise to unhealthy new levels. In 2011, he was arrested after the bodies of 29 girls between the ages of 3 and 25 were found mummified in his apartment. This discovery shocked the community and revealed the extent of his macabre activities. Moskvin attributed his obsession with the macabre to a 1979 incident when he was 13. He shared this story in Necrologies, a weekly publication dedicated to cemeteries and obituaries, to which he was an avid contributor. According to Moskvin, this pivotal experience profoundly influenced his later actions. In his apartment, police discovered that Moskvin had meticulously preserved the corpses, dressing them in bright, elaborate costumes and placing masks or makeup on their faces to resemble life-size dolls. Many of the bodies were also found with music boxes or other trinkets sewn inside them. Moskvin often celebrated the birthdays of his dolls and kept detailed diaries chronicling his activities and interactions with them. Moskvin's actions were driven by a complex web of psychological factors. He claimed that he felt a deep connection to the dead children and believed he could bring them back to life through a ritual he had concocted. This belief was reportedly influenced by his deep interest in the occult and mythology. The authorities deemed Moskvin unfit to stand trial due to his mental health, diagnosing him with paranoid schizophrenia. Consequently, he was committed to a psychiatric facility indefinitely. The case of Anatoly Moskvin shocked Russia and the world, drawing attention to his disturbed psyche and the vulnerabilities in cemetery security. His story has been the subject of various media portrayals, highlighting the eerie and tragic nature of his actions. The final photo of Regina Kay Walters, taken seconds before her death by her killer, also known as the truck stop killer. Regina Kay Walters was a 14-year-old girl from Pasadena, Texas, who tragically became one of the victims of the serial killer Robert Ben Rhodes, also known as the truck stop killer. Born on February 14, 1975, Regina was a bright young girl with a promising future. Her life was cut short in a series of horrifying events that highlight the brutal nature of her killer. In February 1990, Regina and her 18-year-old boyfriend, Ricky Lee Jones, decided to hitchhike from Pasadena, Texas. They were picked up by Robert Ben Rhodes, a long-haul truck driver with a dark and sadistic side. Rhodes had transformed the sleeper cab of his truck into a mobile torture chamber, equipped with various instruments of torture. Unbeknownst to Regina and Ricky, they had fallen into the clutches of a man who had been preying on young hitchhikers for years. Rhodes first murdered Ricky Lee Jones, whose body was never found. He then kept Regina captive for an extended period, during which he subjected her to unspeakable physical and psychological torment. One of the most disturbing aspects of this case is the series of photographs Rhodes took of Regina. These haunting images show her in various stages of distress, dressed in clothes he had selected for her, and posed in abandoned, desolate locations. These photographs provide a chilling glimpse into the horror she endured. Regina's final days were marked by extreme fear and suffering. Her body was eventually discovered in an abandoned barn in rural Illinois. The photographs, which Rhodes kept as trophies, were later found in his possession and played a crucial role in the investigation and his eventual conviction. Robert Ben Rhodes was apprehended in April 1990 after an Arizona state trooper found a handcuffed woman in his truck. This incident led to a deeper investigation, revealing his long history of kidnapping, torture, and murder. Rhodes was linked to multiple murders across several states, though the true extent of his crimes remains unknown. In 1994, Rhodes was convicted of the murders of Regina Kay Walters and another woman, and he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. In subsequent years, he has been linked to additional murders and has received further life sentences. The case of Regina Kay Walters stands out not only for the brutality she endured but also for the grim documentation of her suffering. The photographs Rhodes took are some of the most chilling pieces of evidence in the annals of criminal history. Regina's tragic fate has left a lasting impact on those who have studied the case, contributing to a broader awareness of the perils of hitchhiking and the importance of safety precautions for young people. Her memory is preserved as a solemn reminder of the innocence lost to a heartless killer and the relentless pursuit of justice for his victims. The photograph of the remains of Soviet cosmonaut Vladimir Komarov, also known as the man who fell from space, chosen to pilot the Soyuz 1 spacecraft, launched by the Soviet Union on April 23, 1967. Despite the mission's promise, it ended in tragedy due to a series of mechanical failures. Born on March 16, 1927, in Moscow, Komarov began his career as an aerospace engineer and test pilot. His exceptional skills led to his selection in 1960 as one of the original Soviet cosmonauts. Komarov's first spaceflight was on October 12, 1964, aboard Vol.1, the first spacecraft to carry more than one person into space. The mission was successful, with Komarov and his crewmates orbiting Earth 16 times before safely returning. Komarov's second mission, Soyuz 1, aimed to advance Soviet space capabilities. Launched on April 23, 1967, the mission encountered several technical problems, including issues with the spacecraft's orientation system and parachute deployment. Despite warnings about the spacecraft's safety, Komarov proceeded with the mission. On April 24, 1967, as Soyuz 1 attempted re-entry into Earth's atmosphere, a parachute failure caused the spacecraft to crash in a remote area of Russia, killing Komarov instantly. The photograph of his remains serves as a reminder of the inherent risks of space exploration. In the aftermath of the tragedy, Yuri Gagarin, the first human in space, alluded to the administration's failure to address the concerns raised by the cosmonaut corps regarding the Soyuz module. Gagarin maintained that Komarov's death should teach the establishment to be more rigorous in testing and evaluating. Gagarin and Komarov were good friends, and many cosmonauts recall in their later interviews that Komarov agreed to fly the faulty Soyuz 1 to protect Gagarin. If Komarov withdrew, Gagarin would have taken his place. Vladimir Komarov was posthumously honored as a hero of the Soviet Union. His legacy continues to inspire future generations of astronauts and cosmonauts to push the boundaries of human exploration, even in the face of significant risks. The photograph of the remains of Mary Reeser, a Florida woman who was reduced to ashes. The spontaneous combustion of Mary Reeser is one of the most perplexing and mysterious cases in forensic history. Mary Hardy Reeser, a 67-year-old woman living in St. Petersburg, Florida, was found dead on July 2, 1951, under circumstances that baffled investigators and fueled speculation about spontaneous human combustion, SHC. On the morning of July 2nd, Reeser's landlady, Pansy Carpenter, visited her apartment to deliver a telegram. When Carpenter touched the doorknob, it was unusually hot. Concerned, she called for help, and upon entry, they discovered a horrifying scene. Mary Reeser's body had been almost entirely cremated, reduced to a pile of ashes, with only a portion of her left foot remaining, still wearing a slipper. Nearby objects in the apartment showed little damage, and only a small part of the chair in which she had been sitting was burned. The intense heat necessary to reduce a human body to such a state, typically around 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit, contrasted sharply with the relatively limited damage to the rest of the apartment. This discrepancy led to various theories, including spontaneous human combustion, where a person purportedly catches fire without an apparent external source of ignition. Investigations by local police, the FBI, and forensic experts yielded no conclusive explanation. The FBI's report suggested that Reeser might have been ignited by an external source, such as a cigarette, given that she was a known smoker who had taken sleeping pills, which could have rendered her unable to respond to a fire starting. However, the exact conditions and mechanisms that could cause such a localized and intense fire without spreading remained unexplained. The case of Mary Reeser remains one of the most cited instances in discussions of spontaneous human combustion. Despite scientific skepticism about SHC as a phenomenon, the unusual and selective nature of the combustion in Reeser's case continues to intrigue and puzzle experts and the public alike. A photograph of Edward John Lewis Paisnel, who entered homes at night dressed in a rubber mask and nail-studded wristlets, attacking women and children. Edward Paisnel, infamously known as the Beast of Jersey, was a figure whose name became synonymous with terror and horror on the idyllic island of Jersey, a British Crown dependency in the English Channel. Born in 1924, Paisnel led a seemingly ordinary life as a building contractor, blending into the fabric of the community. However, beneath this facade lay a deeply disturbed individual with a penchant for committing the most despicable acts imaginable. Paisnel's reign of terror began in the 1950s and stretched over a chillingly prolonged period, extending well into the 1960s. Armed with a terrifying mask that concealed his identity, he would break into homes under the cover of darkness, prowling like a predatory shadow. His targets were often vulnerable women and innocent children whom he subjected to unspeakable acts of sexual assault and violence. The psychological trauma inflicted on his victims was compounded by his signature tactic of using a distinctive scent, believed to be perfume, which would linger as a haunting reminder of the atrocities they endured. The island of Jersey, with its tight-knit community and relatively low crime rate, was ill-prepared for the malevolent force that Paisnel represented. Despite the best efforts of law enforcement, he managed to elude capture for years, leaving a trail of fear and devastation in his wake. The lack of advanced forensic technology further hindered efforts to apprehend him, allowing him to continue his reign of terror with impunity. However, the turning point came in 1971 when Paisnel's luck finally ran out. Following a series of meticulously planned police operations, he was apprehended and brought to justice. The trial that followed offered a chilling glimpse into the mind of a remorseless predator. Paisnel was described as cold, calculating, and utterly devoid of empathy for his victims. The testimony of those who had suffered at his hands painted a harrowing picture of the horrors he had inflicted upon the community. In the end, Paisnel was convicted on multiple counts of rape, assault, and other heinous crimes, earning him a sentence of 30 years in prison. While justice was served, the scars left by his reign of terror would linger long after his incarceration. Edward Paisnel died in prison in 1994, but his name lives on as a dark chapter in the history of Jersey, a chilling reminder of the capacity for evil that lurks beneath the surface of seemingly tranquil communities. The photograph of Silke Bischoff, a hostage taken by 2 bank robbers in West Germany at gunpoint. The crisis began on August 16, 1988, when Dieter Degowski and Hans-Jürgen Rossner attempted to rob a branch of the Deutsche Bank in Gladbeck, a city in the Ruhr area of Germany. During the robbery, they took several hostages, including bank employees and customers. After the robbery, Degowski and Rossner fled the scene with their hostages in a stolen car. They soon switched to a stolen BMW and headed towards the Netherlands. Along the way, they stopped at a highway rest area, where they released some hostages but kept others captive. The media coverage of the Gladbeck hostage crisis was unprecedented. Journalists began following the criminals' movements and broadcasting live updates. This intense media scrutiny influenced the behavior of the perpetrators and the police response, leading to criticism of the media's role in the crisis. Degowski and Rossner eventually hijacked a bus with the remaining hostages on board. They forced the bus driver to continue driving while evading police pursuit. The bus journey lasted for hours and covered hundreds of kilometers, with the media broadcasting the events live to a shocked and captivated audience. The crisis came to a violent conclusion on August 18, 1988, when the bus was surrounded by police in the town of Bad Honnef. During a tense standoff, shots were fired, resulting in the deaths of 2 hostages, Silke Bischoff and Emanuele De Giorgi. The exact circumstances of their deaths remain the subject of controversy and debate. Degowski and Rossner eventually surrendered to the police. They were arrested and subsequently stood trial for their crimes. Both were convicted of multiple offenses, including manslaughter, and received lengthy prison sentences. The Gladbeck hostage crisis had a profound impact on German society. It raised significant questions about police tactics, media ethics, and the treatment of crime by the media. The crisis prompted reforms in law enforcement procedures and sparked debates about the responsibilities of journalists covering high-profile events. The Gladbeck hostage crisis remains a dark chapter in German history, remembered for its tragic outcome and the complex issues it raised about crime, media, and public safety.